Well, hi, everybody. I'm your host, Jay Jennings, and we're here for another special show on a special universal actor, a star, a legend, who Court and I feel doesn't get probably his just rewards and accolades, because he is up there with Lugosi and Karloff and the rest of them. And of course, we're talking about the great John Carradine, right, Court?
Absolutely. And we're ready for a dive into Carradine madness. I've been practicing that today.
Well, we'll be doing dueling Carradines all show long. You can't tame a stock, it ain't natural. But anyway, this is a special show we've been looking forward to. John Carradine, I don't know if he's in the Guinness Book of World Records, but I think he's one of the few actors that have been in, I think, 400, 500 films, Court?
Yes, when you count with the television included and the movies and whatever, it is one of the most extensive filmographies. I believe he and Wallace Ford still hold the record for most screen appearances.
Okay. So we can't obviously, do a 2-day show. So we've narrowed it down. We picked, I think, the best of and the worst of, because like Lugosi and Karloff and Zuko and Atwill, Carradine had his variety of turkeys as well. They all do. They all did. They like whether it's the Mr. Wong series or Mr. Moto's, or even though they're fun to watch, not exactly, high concept. So John, as I said, became this mad scientist vampire after his great run in the 30s and 40s. And then he became kind of known as this go-to schlockmeister, but that's what made him fun. I mean, that's why I'm the king of the bees, right, Court?
Exactly.
Right.
But it's remarkable that even for the horror things, whatever, if, he had kind of gone down the ladder a little bit, he would then still appear in a movie from John Ford or, A-level television or whatever. So he always had his foot in both worlds all the time.
Right. And we're going to do a little bio on him. I mean, obviously, he's the dad of the Carradine brothers. There's David and Robert and Keith, and there's another one, too. I don't think he went into acting, but, there's all about them on the internet. But this show's about John and the greatness, and he had that great baritone Shakespearean voice. And that's what he was famous for. Even legend has it, even though he denied it, that he would throw down a few and walk down Hollywood Boulevard reciting Shakespeare. You think that's true, Court?
Well, that was always part of the legend, so I always wanted to believe that, although in later years he vehemently denied it.
Right.
That sounds pretty true to me.
It's not true by any stretch of the imagination. But anyway, we like to believe it is, just like he claimed that he auditioned for both Dracula and Frankenstein. I want to believe it, but I don't think Court does. Do you, Court?
The Dracula, I don't know. The Frankenstein, I've always kind of doubted a little bit, again, because his status as a character actor and even, a leading man in movies was really restricted at this point. And he worked with James Whale, absolutely, because he's in The Invisible Man. But I don't know that he ever did really audition for the monster or was tested for it.
Right. I want to believe it because I love stuff like that. But Court has some great stories to tell about John Carradine on different things that happened to him during different filmings of different movies. Just fun stuff as I try to kind of guide us through his films, starting in 1930 or 31 with Tolerable David, and we're going to end with the House of the Long Shadows. So with that had that legendary teaming of Vincent Price, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, and John Carradine, which was fantastic to have them all at the end of their career. But anyway, John Carradine also says before he even made Tolerable David in 1930, he said he was in 70 films. He just appeared. He didn't have any dialogue, Corey. You think he was in 70 films before his own filmography started?
I don't know if it was that many. He certainly was getting himself established in Hollywood. His theatrical background was expanding certainly, and also during this time, because he was a very skilled artist, he had started the relationship with Cecil B. DeMille and what have you. So there's a lot of things that were going on in his career before he really, you know, exploded. And of course, he and DeMille remained very close associates for a long time, up until DeMille's death, actually.
Oh, okay.
So he was, and he was a fine illustrator and conceptual artist and a sculptor. So he had all these additional talents beyond his thesping.
Right, I think he was going to do that first, kind of like Orson Welles. Remember, he got on a donkey and head over to Ireland, and he was an artist and a sketch. He would sketch different landscapes. So I'm going to read a little bit, just briefly, about John Carradine's background. He was born February 5th, 1906, died November 27th, 1988. He was a member of a DeMille stock company, as you said, and later John Ford's company. In the later decades, he started mostly low-budget B movies and continued to also appear in very high-profile television shows. I think, as I said, he does hold the 351, I think it was, total. One of the most prolific English-speaking actors of all time. He was married 4 times. He had 5 children. We mentioned his sons. He was born in New York, and his dad died when he was 2. That's always traumatic. But his dad, I think his next dad, wasn't very kind. I don't think he was into children. So he ran away from home when he was 14. And as you said, Court, he studied sculpture at the Philadelphia Graphic Arts Institute, lived with his maternal uncle, Peter Richmond. Hence, he adapted the name John Richmond. And that's what he was, in some roles, that's what he was before he did, he went on to become John Carradine. He said he would sketch people painting portraits to feed himself and to live in kind of halfway houses. I made $10 to $15 a day. And he was arrested for vagrancy too. So while in jail, he beaten, and had a broken nose that didn't set correctly. So I guess that's how his proboscis would become world famous. Anyway, he saw a production of Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice when he was 11, and that did it. There's always you always ask a classic actor or a horror actor, what was the one moment that got them into it? I saw Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice, and decided that's what I wanted to do. Made his stage debut in 1925 in a New Orleans production of Camille, and he worked with the New Orleans Shakespeare Company. And so in 1927, actually he picked a theater to work under. Then he picked the name Peter Richmond, not John Richmond, thanks to his uncle. He wanted to pay him homage. And anyway, so DeMille noticed the lack of Roman columns in his sketches, because I guess he wanted to be a set designer, and so that changed very quickly. But he was hired to do voiceovers, Court, and DeMille, I guess, had an apparition of John doing the Gravedigger's lines from Hamlet, and that convinced Cecil B. DeMille to hire him. What do you think?
Well, Carradine's voice was so immediately recognizable, and such a magnificent instrument that, of course, as sound, John Carradine's career in the movies really began as sound began. And I don't think that's a coincidence, because of his beautiful voice. And the Carradine name, that was actually from his mother's side of the family, correct?
Okay. And so anyway, by 1933, as I said, he was going around as John Peter Richmond. Okay, it'd be nice if I could get me. Okay. John Peter Richmond was his name. And anyway, as I say, he tested supposedly for the monster in Dracula, which is, I guess, up for a debate. But he did appear in a lot of small little roles before he ended up starring in his own film, which I think his first starring role was a captive wild woman, was it not, Court?
Yeah, when Universal signed him, but he's so the voice. I got a way to catch the invisible man. See, you wait till it snows. See, remember that scene in the phone booth? There he is in the Invisible Man, and then he has that immediately recognizable but non-speaking role in The Black Cat, where of course he's playing the organ and those wonderful Edgar Ulmer Dutch-angled
Right.
close-ups of all the satanic worshippers around Boris Karloff, including Michael Mark from Frankenstein. And then, of course, probably, I think the significant role for all the monster kids was as the hunter who completely screws up the monster's life in Bride of Frankenstein.
Right.
He breaks in on the monster and the blind man.
Right. So let's take a look at some photos. I found this was very hard to find, but I'm glad I did. This is from Tolerable David. There he is on the left, Court. His first role, I think, where he had a line or two. Prior to that, he didn't really speak in films. And I guess this is the famous first film that everybody knows he was in. And then, of course, after that, I don't even know if I even showed it. Did I just show Tolerable David? Was that on the screen, Court?
No, it wasn't.
Okay, well, let me let me show it again real quick. I guess we had a technical difficulty. Just a minute. There he is, Intolerable David. And who's the cast? You know who else is in this, Court?
Well, that's Henry B. Walthall there in the middle. And, of course, he was a very big silent star. And this also was a remake of a very famous silent movie. And, in fact, in The Tingler, it is the silent version of Tolerable David that the audience is watching when the Tingler gets loose in the theater.
Right. I think that's the 1921 version, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
right.
here's John Carradine. It's unmistakably the back of his hair and his fingers. This is about the 5 seconds of him that appears in the film, and I think he also appears in the background when all the cult members of the Satan worshiping club of Karloff of Vitagast, I guess they're all with the stairwell, and I think John's in the background for a second. But he's not in it too long, but it is unmistakably him, which is very cool. Then you mentioned he's in the Bride of Frankenstein. The bride is the monster is having a good time with the blind old man and smoking and having a good time when I guess John and they're hunters and they come in and I guess are they knocking on the door to warn the old man to beware of the monster, and then he says, it's the monster, can't you see?
He's blind. Yeah, I can't. No, I think they're lost, and aren't they? They come to O.P. Hagee's hut to ask directions out of the woods or whatever the situation is, and then they recognize the monster and, what are you doing? Why are you taking me? And they're like hustling him out while the place catches on fire, and Boris Karloff is getting enraged, righteously enraged. And so John really throws a monkey wrench into the monster's friendship.
Right. And then after that, so he has some brief roles. He's also, I forgot to mention, he's also briefly, if you blink, he doesn't have a speaking role. He's also in Murders in the Rue Morcourt. And I don't
really?
know. Yeah. I read that in 2 biographies. I wanted to make sure I got that right. I don't know exactly what scene it is. I'm going to have to run it again and find it, but it says for sure he's in it. Although IMDb does not list that in his credits. But anyway, you heard it here, folks. Court and I always reveal stuff that maybe you haven't heard. But anyway, the film after that, when I say after that, there could be a skipping of films, but the film that we're going to show is A Prisoner of Shark Island. This is not a bad film at all, Court.
This is a wonderful movie. And this is was Carradine's first collaboration with John Ford. And this was the thing, when Carradine went to 20th Century Fox, suddenly his career really blossomed because he was in major movies. He also was in some silly movies with the Ritz brothers, and he was in Mr. Moto films and Charlie Chan movies, and all different sizes of roles. But Ford loved him, and he is so evil and nasty as the guard who was in charge of Dr. Mudd after Lincoln's assassination. And Dr. Mudd, played by Warner Baxter. And there's a very famous tale associated with this movie. Um, John Ford lived in a house above the Hollywood Bowl. Back in those days, there were actually homes there. And he kept hearing this voice at night booming from the Hollywood Bowl. And he called the police and he said, "Look, somebody's down there yelling and screaming, and I think they're drunk or whatever, but go kick them out of there, will you? This is driving me crazy. I can't sleep." So the police go on down to the Hollywood Bowl and check it out. So the next day, everybody's at 20th Century Fox and they're waiting for John Carradine. And they're waiting and they're waiting. And he finally shows up a few hours later. And of course, he was the one who was down at the Hollywood Bowl reciting Shakespeare at 1 o'clock in the morning, his voice booming all over the Hollywood Hills. And John Ford is the one who had him arrested and didn't realize it. And he's waiting for him to show up. And he shows up and goes, "Where the hell have you been?" I was apprehended by the gendarmes. So, yeah, Ford realized what he had done. But
that's a great. No, that's a great story.
He loved Carradine and and used him so well and so effectively over the years.
Right. No, he did. I think he made 11 films with John Ford. Anyway, speaking of which, I don't know if this is Captain Courageous is not a John Ford film, is it, Tom? Courtney?
No, that's a wonderful movie, though.
Right. So let's take a look at this scene here. I think this takes place on a ship, and I'm not familiar with this film, Court. Is this the one with Spencer Tracy?
Spencer Tracy and Freddie Bartholomew. And no, it's a wonderful movie. It's directed by Victor Fleming.
Okay.
This was MGM. Which again goes to Carradine's status that he was being borrowed even for these huge movies. And, I was always actually rather surprised he was not cast in Gone with the Wind.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. You would think he would have been. So moving on, his next film was a famous film that he was in. Jesse James, he made a slew of films. I think he made 3 or 4 films with Tyrone Power. Court, of course, the famous scene where remember his hand shakes?
He is Robert Ford.
Yep, the man who shot Jesse James, and he befriends him. And I mean, we all know the story. I don't know if it was jealousy or he wanted the reward, or it's just it's just a sad story. I mean, it's just well, when you see it, I mean, Jesse James, I guess he was probably a ruthless killer. But the way the movie was made, you actually felt sorry.
Oh, sure. Well, it's Ty Power, and they didn't want to show him as a psychopath, which Jesse James actually was. But Carradine then, of course, played Bob Ford again in The Return of Frank James, which was the sequel they did with Henry Fonda.
Right. We'll talk about that in a second. But we were saying how he went from he would go from really cool films to maybe kind of low budget PRC kind of stuff. So right after he made Jesse James, right, he went in to Mr. Moto's Last Warning.
But that was also 20th Century Fox.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it was higher budget then, because most of the Mr. Motos were a lot of them were Poverty Road, weren't they, Court?
No, they were all Fox. The ones with Peter Lorre.
Really? Okay. And then, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention one of the great roles in John Carradine's life, and one of the great westerns of all time, and that would be Stagecoach Court.
Absolutely. And Ford again, and of course this was an independent production. And jumping back to Jesse James for just a second, that was, by that time, I think, the 3rd movie that Carradine had appeared in which Lon Chaney also appeared. And they ended up being together in, I believe, 12 movies.
And some of them not so good.
Some of them not so good.
Right.
And but everyone kind of forgets about the 20th Century Fox period where they were, Jesse James and Frontier Marshal and all these other things. But his performance here in Stagecoach is so wonderful because he is the direct contrast to John Wayne. He's the direct contrast to Andy Devine and everybody in the film because he's such a slickster, and he's kind of got that snake charming aspect to his role as the gambler, and he's just wonderful in this movie.
Oh, it's a classic film. Obviously, he's got some great dialogue in the stagecoach when they're being attacked, in the saloon. Orson Welles, as you know, watched Stagecoach 30 times before he tackled Citizen Kane. And then after that, another great film where Carradine played a lot of butlers. It would be an understatement. I don't know, find someone else who played more butlers than John Carradine. That might be an episode in itself, the butler roles of John Carradine. And it began with Hound of the Baskervilles Court.
Absolutely. And
here,
of course,
he played Berryman. I'm Berryman, Mr. Holmes.
And interestingly, when he was under contract to Universal, they never. I think he would have made a wonderful Professor Moriarty, but they never did cast him in any of the modern day Sherlock Holmes pictures.
And they were so atmospheric and so spooky. And his voice and his presence, thin, gaunt, but always professional.
Well, Jay, this was the reason he was used so often at Fox, was he was the perfect red herring. You saw John Carradine and you immediately thought he was up to something sinister. Like here, he is, of course, moving the candle back and forth, but what he's doing is he's signaling his brother-in-law.
Right.
To try and stay out of harm's way. He's escaped from prison, and he and his wife are trying to help him as he's hiding out on the moors. But just the fact that it's Carradine doing it, you immediately think, oh my gosh, there's got to be something horrible going on, when in fact there isn't. But that was what he carried with him as soon as he stepped in front of the camera.
Absolutely. And then after this role, after Hound of Baskervilles, a year later, was one of the great films of all time about the Great Depression. That was The Grapes of Wrath, where he played Jim Cassie. And there's some scene-stealing scenes in this film between him and Henry Fonda.
Yeah, he is a preacher. He is just remarkable. And, of course, his speech to Fonda as Tom Joad about what has happened to their farm and everything else. And you see that amazing flashback with the bulldozers taking everything down and John Quaylen pounding on the ground, we died here. That's what makes it ourn. Just amazing. And he is absolutely wonderful. And he's so subdued in his performance. So anyone who always says, well, John Carradine always seemed kind of overblown or he was over the top or whatever, they just haven't seen the work. Because
right. He should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actor. I mean, he
really should have been.
Incredible role.
Just wonderful in this movie.
Well, I agree. And so, as I said, little bit pieces in horror here and there, but mostly non-horror to start off his career. I mean, Hound of the Baskervilles, mystery, suspense. I don't think the first Sherlock Holmes film was promoted as a horror film. But anyway, as you said, you mentioned the return of Frank James, where he's the star of the film, is he not, Cord?
Yes, he and Henry Fonda, and directed by Fritz Lang, who Carradine worked for several times. And that was also something else, Jay, that we see whenever looking at this career. And of course, you can't amass as many credits without working with the same people over and over again. But directors who liked him cast him, not just John Ford, but Edgar Ulmer cast him multiple times. Fritz Lang cast him multiple times. So I think that's always worth noting, that they wanted someone reliable who they thought was excellent, and they would call John Carradine.
Right. And I think also what's underrated is he was a master of disguises, and he was almost like a Lon Chaney. Almost every film, his face is different, his costume is different, his wig is different, his mustache and beard is different. I don't think people realize that, the historians, that yeah, he was a great distinguished actor, but we're just looking at these photos one after another. He just basically takes on a completely different role.
But also, too, I think that comes personally from him and from his theatrical background. And that playing different roles and different styles and what have you, I think that was just part of his, organic makeup as an actor because he thought that was part of his responsibility.
Right. And then after, he would go back and forth, whether it was a drama, a comedy, a period piece. His next film, he got to work with Milton Berle, and I couldn't find a photo of him. I don't think one exists, but he's in the poster as Long Jack. And what's funny in this film, Milton Berle goes on a boat, and it's like a murder mystery. And there's a guy who's not Rochester, but what's the guy's name who, Mr. Berle? What was his name?
Oh, who was his valet? That was that Mantan Moreland in Whiskey
No, it was
Hills?
somebody. It was somebody. Anyway, the funny scene is they're in that kind of below deck, and all of a sudden this movie comes on out of nowhere that only his assistant can see, and it's the Long Jack. It's Carradine with the patch on, scaring everybody. But every time, it's the old gag. Every time Milton Berle looks at him, what are you talking about? I don't see anything. It was just on the screen here.
Well, and of course, the beautiful Brenda Joyce from Strange Confession and Pillow of Death, and was also, I think, the real va 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 voom Jane of Tarzan.
Right. So, and then after that, started a long career of John Carradine playing Nazis, Gestapo,
Oh
SS
yeah.
colonels and stuff. And it all began, we're not going to review them all here, only the ones I think that are worth mentioning because of the of how he looked. But here he was actually not dressed as a Nazi, but he is later on. And that is I Escaped from the Gestapo.
Right. Now, I Escaped from the Gestapo. That really was one of the movies that started him working for independent producers. And he was looking towards Monogram and PRC and, whatever the opportunities came up. Now, of course, he wanted good roles, but that was, that started kind of a pattern in his career once he had stepped away from 20th Century Fox and was freelancing.
Right. And then after that, we mentioned his first, I guess, lead in a horror film with Aquanetta and Evelyn Ankers, and that was Captive Wild Woman.
And absolutely. And in fact, let's see, can I?
Well, hold
There
on.
we go.
Okay.
Now, the great fun is with that particular lobby card. I was with Harry Carey Jr. and I was interviewing him for a project, and he is married to Paul Fix's daughter, Marilyn. And she would go when she was in high school. She would go out to Universal and wait till her dad was done with work, and they would go home together. She was there the day that scene was filmed. So I gave them a copy of that lobby card, and they're looking at it, and she remembered watching her dad being strangled by Ray Crash Corrigan in the gorilla suit. And
Right.
Harry Carey Jr. said, "Oh my gosh, look at Jackie Carradine." I'd never, ever since or before heard anyone refer to John Carradine as Jackie.
Well, don't call me Jackie.
Yeah, but, they sure loved him, and but that was just wild.
So after Captive Wild Woman, I think this is one of the great roles in one of the great Nazi roles, because they made him Aryan and blonde. I mean, you wouldn't think that that's, if you were just casting, that you would cast John with a low voice. But in those days, Cord, if you remember, Nazis didn't really speak much with a German accent in American films. They speak with a British accent. And
Well,
that's
that's because they usually cast British actors as Nazis.
right. So anyway, one of the great, uh, I guess, Nazi films of the 40s, and I don't mean anything positive. I just mean photography and acting and Dutch angles, is Hitler's Mad Men.
Yes.
I mean, look at that. I mean, they look what they did to his nose. Tell us about this film.
Well, this movie, uh, was actually made independently and then picked up by a major studio. And and there's Carradine playing Heydrich, and he very much wanted to look like the real officer. And so he, according to his own interviews, went to tremendous lengths to make sure his appearance and everything else. He didn't want it to be some kind of grand theatrical performance. He really wanted it to be accurate and terrifying, which it absolutely is. But the film was made independently. It was and then bought by a studio.
Okay. Well, absolutely, Court. And as I said, it wasn't the last Nazi he would play. I guess he started making some low budget B films, and this was Revenge of the Zombies, where it's kind of like White Zombie, but instead of instead of Lugosi, it's with John Carradine. He creates a kind of a race of zombies who, in the end, turn on him. And I've got a photo of that. What do you remember about Revenge of the Zombies? Was that kind of a
That
low
was
budget fare?
it was because it was monogram, but it's very artfully directed by Steve Sakili, who was, I think, really underrated, although he always kind of drifted on the low budget independent films for most of his career. But Carradine is trying to revive his wife, Vita Ann Borg, and basically using techniques to revive the dead to try and bring her back to life. And it all backfires on him, as we might know. But it's the one thing about this film, not only because Sakili uses some unusual angles, it's very well photographed. It is also known right now for the very, let's say, energetic comedic performance of Mantan Moreland as Robert Lowry's driver.
Oh, okay.
It is definitely a feats don't fail me now situation there.
Okay, with the eyes wide open. So
Absolutely.
after this film, he followed it up with one of your favorites, and that was Voodoo Man. And we'll just go by this real quickly because we've actually discussed this film on a previous show. But he plays the dimwit, not a really great role. He plays the assistant to Lugosi, who uses weird soul transformations to bring his dead wife back. So 2 films in a row where he's trying to revive his dead wife. And
Well, the thing is, this was also monogram, and no, I'm not that big on Voodoo Man, but we talk about filmmakers who would use Carradine or were signed to work with him over and over again. William Bodine directed Voodoo Man, and good Lord, he and Carradine, I can't even count how many times that they worked together in films and television, but it was a lot.
right. And after that, back to Invisible Man territory with The Invisible Man's Revenge with John Hall, that this will only sting. And of course, he helps him out at first when the Invisible Man realizes John Carradine's walking his invisible dog. He figures, hey, wait a minute, this might help me. And instead, of course, the serum not only makes you invisible, but it also makes you mad and jealous and crazy. So unfortunately, Carradine's character of Dr. Drury has the misfortune of trying to make a phone call. I guess was he trying to tell his whereabouts, and he doesn't realize the Invisible Man's still there, right, Court?
No, that's it. And the thing is, though, the madness caused by the invisibility serum goes all the way. That goes back to H.G. Wells. That's in the original novel, and of course they use it with Claude Rains. And by the time of Invisible Man's Revenge, Universal would always spend a little bit more money on the Invisible Man films just because of the John P. Fulton effects. And Bertram Milhouse, who wrote many of the Sherlock Holmes movies, wrote this particular film. Ford Beebe directed it. And what's kind of amazing about it when you see the film is there's no sympathy at all for the Invisible Man. I mean, he thinks he's been screwed over, yeah, but his solution for all of this is just to slaughter everybody.
Right.
There's no
Yeah.
great development of, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. No, he wants to kill from the very beginning, and he sticks with it all the way through. But this was all, remember, part of Universal's building of Carradine as a horror star, which of course included the Mummy's Ghost. And in fact, we have, which we didn't show on our Kyra show, this beautiful piece with John with Ramsey Ames.
Right. This is
Just
where,
wonderful.
right after this, you start saying, wait a minute. Why am I giving
Yep,
her to Caris when I'm in love with her?
absolutely.
Right.
And then of course too, this was right at the same year the back-to-back Dracula performances. So Universal really was trying to build that image for Carradine because they didn't have instant access to Boris Karloff anymore. They had kind of pushed Bela Lugosi out the door, and so they needed someone to, take up that slack because they had Lon Chaney, but they had him in the inner sanctums and what have you. So they needed someone else to be in there to pinch hit for these films, and they chose John Carradine.
Right. And before he went on that slew of horror films, Mummy's Ghost, Return of the Ape Man, Bluebeard, House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, Face of Marble, he made a couple non-horror films, and one of them was with was Waterfront with J. Carroll Nash. And this isn't actually kind of a straightforward drama.
It is, and again, but this is once again like so many of the films made at the outset of World War II. This movie is actually rather interesting because it is one of the very early movies dealing with the FBI. And Jimmy Cagney and G-Men and some things like that, and people were kind of finding out about the FBI in little spurts and things, but they were used to Tommy guns and shooting it out with Ma Barker or John Dillinger or something. And Waterfront is actually about espionage, and it's a little PRC programmer, but it's a good one. It's a very solid. And Carradine and J. Carroll Nash, that was always the great thing with these movies is these lower budget companies, they wanted like life insurance when they made these movies. And that life insurance was hiring these great character actors who were dependable and who would deliver and could stand in front of that camera and become those characters and fire it off so the picture could be done in 12 days. And let's also, Jay, let's not forget that John Carradine had a photographic memory.
Oh, okay.
And that's why he was so favored by so many of these producers who were under tough schedules.
And that would help, I mean, for scripts and stuff, as opposed to someone
Absolutely.
who needed help. So as I said, this was a slew of horror films he started making. The Mummy's Ghost, which we covered in our Kari's show. And this is a great film with, Zuko's in it, and Lon Chaney, and of course the great Ramsey Ames. And I'll just show some more photos from this as we move along. Kari's, whenever you want some Tana leaves, just give me a call.
And of course, directed by Reginald LeBorg, who would direct John Carradine again in The Black Sleep. So there's always going to be a repeat performance for John Carradine. And of course, yeah, here's the famous scene where
Disintegration
Iris,
scene.
yep, and he
What happened to her?
tears everything to pieces. Yep.
Right, and this is before, and we discussed how Lon throws a tantrum and he starts bleeding inside his uniform, which is really great. We check out the Caris episode that we discussed the Mummy movies at length. And so after this film, after The Mummy's Ghost, a little bit we go down a little bit in quality, but it's still one of the great fun horror films with John Carradine and Lugosi. And we've discussed this I think during the Zuko episode, and that's the Return of the Ape Man. Of course, that's not Zuko,
No,
but
that's a Frank Moran.
right, Frank Moran. And just Carradine's good in it, and Lugosi's great in it. He's running down the street with a blowtorch, and as we said, no one cares.
Remarkable, yes.
And it's just a really fun film. So he,
But this
so
is also a movie. Excuse me. This
yeah.
is also a movie that John Carradine plays the piano in again. He, when it seemed to me that whenever they could, they let him return to the keyboards.
And as they should. Okay, then comes, I think, probably his probably best starring role. And there's no question about this. As I said, too much of a budget because it's Bluebeard PRC, right?
It sure is.
Right.
Yep.
If this would have been done by a major company, he might have been nominated for Best Actor. And we're talking about Bluebeard, of course. This pathos and he plays, Gaston, this killer of women, the famous Bluebeard, but the way he portrays it, as this kind of tortured guy who just can't control his urges, is really, you have to see this film if you haven't.
It's wonderful, and there, of course, is the beautiful Jean Parker from Dead Man's Eyes and the original stage production of Born Yesterday, co-starring Lon Chaney, which a lot of people may not be aware of. But he is wonderful in this movie. And in fact, I have, of course, a lobby card from it.
Let's see. Oh, wow. Right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And killing Ludwig Stossel there.
Oh, Ludwig Stossel, who plays, he's in House of Frankenstein.
Yeah, yes, he is. Well, he's in and House of Dracula.
Right. And he's in Ghost of Frankenstein.
Yes, he is.
One of the townspeople who sits on the board. So let's look at this shot I wanted to show. Lugosi was famous for his eyes, but let's not sell John Carradine short. That's a famous scene. I guess before he strangles his victims, they'd always show a close-up of his eyes.
Well, Edgar Ulmer made a very interesting statement once to Peter Bogdanovich in a very extensive interview that was very good about his entire career. And he said, Carradine was the kind of actor I could hold on to. I think that was an interesting statement because I think it meant that Carradine's own instincts were so good, especially for this film, that it's like he gave him the freedom that he needed in order to really come to, truly perfect this performance. And Ulmer had the good sense not to step in too much and block whatever Carradine's creative juices were, because, of course, the performance is terrific, and what Ulmer achieved and how he achieved it in that very short amount of time, because I believe Bluebeard was shot in 8 days, correct?
I think so. 8 to 10, I think I read. Okay, so after he made Bluebeard, which, as I said, if you haven't seen it, it's a must-watch. We discussed House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula at length. And here he is in that great Baron Lautos pose at the carnival. And
For that, I will do anything you wish.
Remove the stake from your hand. Do it now. And this is a great, as I said, he looks fantastic, of course. And then another great scene from this movie is when he mesmerizes Anne Gwyn with his ring. I see a land where people are alive, yet dead. It's a place I come from. You'll really dig it.
Well, Carradine was, of course, he also would play Dracula on the stage. And he was very proud of his interpretations of Dracula because of the mustache and those things that he felt were much more in keeping with the way Bram Stoker had originally described the character. And he brought this up, rather frequently, not just because he did it on stage with a mustache and all of those things, but because he was able to convince Universal to allow him to do it in House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. And, he's come under a lot of heat by folks because Universal opted for Carradine rather than Bela Lugosi, because Bela Lugosi is so wonderful in Abbott Costello Meet Frankenstein. But whatever was going on at Universal, Carradine was the flavor of the month, or the flavor of, the length of his contract. And I think he's wonderful as Dracula. I've always liked his performance.
Oh, right. No, I mean, of course, purists will say Bela Lugosi, of course, even though he's only Dracula in 2 films, or Mark of the Vampire 3, or Return of the Vampire 4. He could be Count Dracula. But this Carradine brings a sense of kind of away from that Romanian, Transylvanian, that aristocrat kind of feel, and gives it more of a down English gentleman. He's wearing the top hat. I'm Baron Latos, and may I invite you for a drink? It's like, oh no, you must come to the Hussman house. I have the best winery in the city.
No, it's like the best Sig Rumen I've heard today.
Because we're all doing Sig Rumen.
Yes.
But anyway, so after the House of Frankenstein, a total change of pace for John Carradine, playing alongside another. I mean, he worked with so many people so many times: Ty Power, Lon Chaney, Charles Laughton, and here he is in Captain Kidd, I think, as his first mate, Orange Povey.
Yep.
And this is a great scene. He's almost in every scene. He asks for his.
Absolutely, he is. Yeah.
He asks for his advice and his counsel, and of course, Charles Laughton, chews up the scenery as he always does. And then after this film, we went right back to the Universal Dracula series, and Baron Latos appears again. Here he is. I love this shot between the candles. And he's talking about, and Gwyn's putting on the ring, and it doesn't fit. It'll get smaller. And we talked about this film at length in a previous episode. But it's just obviously you'd be remiss if we didn't talk about House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula, bringing the back ends of just really of Baron Latos and him giving that kind of different take on the role. And here he is with Martha O'Driscoll in the famous library scene. They take a little walk past the mirror and he doesn't see him, and no one sees him. Where is he? So that's a great effect, of course. And then after House of Dracula Court, was another kind of odd film for John Carradine. I think you can almost call it his, this is kind of his Mad Ghoul, and we're talking about Face of Marble.
Face of Marble is again, this is Carradine working yet again with William Bodine, and this was Monogram, but this was Monogram just in kind of the last death throes of the studio, because it was going to soon become Allied Artists. And they wanted to try and upgrade their product, and they did to a degree and didn't to a degree. But this again is another interesting movie, just because it's kind of, as you said, is it a zombie picture? Is it a supernatural ghost film? I don't know. It kind of has a little trouble finding itself. Robert Shane was interviewed by Tom Weaver about this movie, and I think his big comment was, "Oh, no comment," except that John Carradine would recite Shakespeare in between takes.
That's not surprising. So anyway, after this film, that ended the 40s horror cycle. Basically, well, House of Dracula did. I know Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, but for John Carradine it did. The 40s cycle was over, and the 50s started. This is where he actually expanded into other roles besides horror. We're going to show photos from Johnny Guitar, The Kentuckian, The Ten Commandments. Around, I don't have a photo from Around the World in 80 Days, but I think he does a pistol, what's it called, standoff with David Niven. So, but so let's first take a look where he in Johnny Guitar, where he plays Old Tom. It's sad. There's a time where I guess she's fighting to keep her property, and of course Mercedes McCambridge.
Mercedes McCambridge, right?
and they want to run her out because they don't like her. We don't like your kind. I don't know what that means, but it's very symbolic. It's been talked about what the film actually means, but we're not going to discuss that here. But it's very colorful. It's a really great, odd, one of the strangest westerns ever made. But John
Yeah.
Carradine
Scott
holds
Brady and Ernie Borgnine and
right, and so Carradine holds a gun or a rifle on, I guess, the bad guys, and instead of covering for Joan Crawford, he's shot in a very sad death scene. He's kind of says something. I tried to get him for you. Oh, then he dies. So, but just another great character role. And then, of course,
by Nicholas Ray. And of course, Joan Crawford kept quitting the movie. And they would have to, bring her back and what have you. Sterling Hayden was not that fond of her. And this was a real contentious shoot, apparently. But they got through it. And but again, it was of an odd stripe, which was typical of Nicholas Ray usually, unless a few more ordinary movies like Knock on Any Door. But still, this was an unusual film, and its cult reputation, of course, is absolutely enormous.
right, and Carradine had a small role in it, but he had a little bit of a bigger role, not much, as Zibby Fletcher in The Kentuckian, kind of an oil snake salesman hawking his goods court.
Absolutely, and of course, The Kentuckian was the first film directed by Burt Lancaster, who starred in it.
So Walter Matthau is the bad guy in the Kentuckian, and Burt Lancaster, and him have a few great scenes together. And
starring and directing, yeah.
Right, and then of course John has a great scene there as kind of he's got his elixir to sell. So moving on then to, I think you can say some people love the film, others say it's a nadir beginner for everybody involved, whether it's Basil Rathbone, Lugosi, of course, it's got to be, and Tor Johnson and Lon Chaney, and of course we're talking about Dr. Cadman's Secret. What was that? Oh, it's The Black Sleep.
Well, I actually have that particular lobby card signed by Reggie Laborde. I have another one right here. Yeah, there we go. There's the title card, and there's John up in the corner. And I like the movie. It has its problems because again, it was made for not the greatest amount of money, et cetera, et cetera. But it's got some artful moments. It boasts some nice performances. And it is kind of, if you will, the last roundup for a lot of these actors. Now, Rathbone was in a weird position, but he was doing still movies like The Court Jester, and he was Casanova's Big Night and things like that. So he was very much in demand. And by the way, Casanova's Big Night with John Carradine, he was just amazing. He was just, if he wasn't doing The Black Sleep, he was doing a movie with Bob Hope. Also, Lon Chaney is in that movie. So these guys were all jumping back and forth from whatever horror assignment seemed appropriate for them to something huge. Like Chaney would be doing movies with Gary Cooper or Randolph Scott or what have you. Rathbone would getting ready to do another movie with John Ford, which John Carradine is also in, The Last Hurrah. So that's how I look at The Black Sleep as kind of this nice little way station, and it's right there in the middle. And Akeem Tamaroff, though, is miscast, though. He's fun, but it was supposed to be Peter Lorre, and he refused it.
Oh, okay. Well, then after The Black Sleep, another 180-degree turn, appearing in the Ten Commandments, and as Aaron, and they're breaking bread and having wine. Obviously, one of the great spectacles of all time, like Ben-Hur and stuff like that. It's just a great, and Carradine has this nice scene or two, I think. He adds his baritone voice to it.
Well, and again, this just once again demonstrates the loyalty of filmmakers to John Carradine and vice versa, because here is Cecil B. DeMille And I doubt that DeMille wanted to make, would have made no, he wouldn't have refused to make the movie, but I think he probably found comfort in the fact that Carradine was in it because they had such a long history.
Right. And then after the Ten Commandments, he made Around the World in 80 Days. And then after that, he made one of our, I guess, guilty pleasures, and that's The Unearthly. And The Unearthly is all over the place. I mean, he is just, it's kind of like what The Black Sleep could have been if it was actually decent. And it's got Tor Johnson again, and he is harboring bodies. And it's kind of like, The Unearthly is, I guess it's Carradine's Island of Dr. Moreau. He's just got bodies everywhere in the cellar. And of course, the famous line, Tor comes out and tells Myron Healy, time for go to bed.
Time for to go to bed. But you've got Sally Todd and that great poster with her looking over her shoulder at us. And oops. And speaking of, ta-da!
Mario, 'tis late.
Yep. There we go. Lured into the House of Monsters, and you have all those wild Harry Thomas makeups and Sally Todd gets all disfigured, and I mean the movie is just absolutely all over the place.
Oh, it's bonkers.
You've got Allison Hayes, and it's just totally gonzo. And I don't know. I'm still I'm very forgiving of The Black Sleep and Reginald Borg and all that stuff, and it's better made than poor old Unearthly is just like, what the hell is this? But it's great fun. And boy, I'll tell you what, you want a hero who's shooting straight, you got Myron Healy, baby.
Right.
You don't mess with Myron.
Right. And then after this film, there was The Story of Mankind. This is one of my first John Carradine impressions. And the story is, of course, Vincent Price is the devil, and he takes on, is it Ronald Coleman, I think, who plays Mankind, and I think mankind should be wiped out. I believe it should be saved. And so they go to like a jury and a courtroom, I guess in the netherworld, presided by Sir Cedric Hardwicke as the judge, and they both have to plead their case. And they plead their case. Vincent Price calls upon all the great evil people of mankind. And this is one of the great things. He brings John Carradine to the stand. State your name for the jury. Khufu. and he says, well, what did I do for you? You offered me immortality, and then you double-crossed me. I mean, it's just a great all-star cast. Groucho Marx is in it, Chico Marx. Almost every major star of the mid-'50s is in this film in a cameo.
Dennis Hopper and Ann Bax, everybody. And of course, now this was John working with Irwin Allen.
Oh, right, Irwin Allen, of course, right. And after The Story of Mankind, Court, the only reason I added this because it's a cool lobby, of course. And Mike Mazurki and Peter Lorre are in Hellship Mutiny.
Yes. But this is also, this is where we're seeing again, Carradine, the independent producers coming to him. And that's also what was going on in Hollywood is the studio system was kind of unraveling and they were trying to decide about television and all the rest of this stuff was going on. So indie producers, because the studios had lost their theaters, were now just, popping up all over the place again. And Carradine just made himself available.
Right.
And whether it was a Western or a crime picture or an adventure. And he did a lot of, Arabian adventure, tits and sands kind of films, that they used to call them. And he was a busy boy.
Oh, he always worked. I mean, obviously with all the films he made. Then he made a slew of films. This is near the late 50s where this was kind of, almost C or D quality. They're fun. You look back on them and it was fun to get them on VHS. But it began with The Incredible Petrified World, where I think he invents kind of like this underwater, what is it, like a sand belt cord or something?
Yeah, it's some damn thing.
Looks like a weight in a weight training room.
Yeah, I mean, this is when Carradine started his association with Jerry Warren.
Right.
I always say I feel bad for him. I mean, he has plenty to do, but this was the thing. Warren and Carradine worked with Jerry Warren a lot, but he again was given, as Warren said, just pages of gobbledygook, and he could fire it off just letter perfect. So
Yeah.
there he was valuable, and this was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 days work, and
Right.
then off to the next thing. Yeah.
And the next thing was the Cosmic Man, which is not bad. It's actually not bad. It's actually predates the Man Who Fell to Earth, and also I think it comes after the Day the Earth Stood Still. So, but you can tell where it wants to go. He's got the wired rim glasses, and he befriends a young boy. What's that famous line that the kid says? Mom, there goes the Cosmic Man.
Well, the thing is with the Cosmic Man, which I think is important versus say something like Incredible Petrified World. First of all, it's a much better movie and it's better made and everything else. But isn't it, the Cosmic Man is really a John Carradine vehicle? It's not just he was thrown into a part to spout a lot of nonsensical dialogue. This was a real role for him. And I think he's wonderful in this movie.
And he's actually pretty good. I mean, with his wire rim glasses and stuff, he's very sympathetic because he's an alien and he needs our help.
Yeah.
And then after that, kind of back to the mad scientist role, Court and Invisible Invaders. There's zombies in this film as well. And it's funny, his name isn't Dr. Niemann, it's Dr. Neumann.
Well, also with Invisible Invaders, and of course, Carradine, is kind of a body replacement thing that the aliens are doing, and you've got John Agar and Philip Tong and everybody. But this was Robert E. Kent, United Artists, producing and writing, and directed by Edward L. Kahn. And over, people have looked at this movie, and also to a degree, Creature with the Atom Brain, which Edward L. Kahn also directed over at Columbia, as possible visual inspiration to George Romero for Night of the Living Dead. And when you see the zombies coming out of the hills and kind of the way they're presented and everything else, I don't know. I would imagine that 14-year-old George Romero may very well have seen this movie and thought, oh, what a cool visual, and kept it in the back of his mind when he made his own classic.
Probably. So the 50s came to an end, Court, and it began with Sex Kittens Go to College.
How's that, baby?
Right. There's Louis Nye doing his best Groucho Marx impression. And as I said, it's got some, it's very cheeky, and it's a full-blown comedy, and it was obviously a Mamie Van Doren vehicle. And this was the opposite of what you were saying, as opposed to a vehicle made for Carradine. They wanted to add a little something to it, so, with the rest of the cast, they threw him in it.
And also, too, there were different cuts of the movie, because there's the one with the nudity in it, and for the foreign market and all that stuff. And, it was remarkable, because there's John Carradine in that, and then here he is in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. And there he is as Rufus T. Starbuckle. And his only qualification for the job is that he murdered a man.
Right. Actually, I'm Major Cassius Starbuckle.
Excuse me.
And there's a lot of great people in this movie. Andy Devine's in this movie.
Liberty Valance.
Right.
And of course, there's Brian and Jimmy Stewart and Ken Murray. And now this is Carradine's only scene in the film, but he is wonderful in it. And but again, there he is, Paramount, John Ford again, and everything else. And or else the pendulum was swinging back to the independents, like something like, of course, Female Jungle with Jane Mansfield and Lawrence Tierney there in the late 50s.
Right.
And which was an indie, and it was picked up by American International after Jane Mansfield really hit it big. And so he was, definitely moving from spot to spot, and he would continue with Ford almost to the very end of Ford's career, because he would make several more appearances for him.
Right. But I don't think John Ford wanted anything to do with Billy the Kid versus Dracula.
Oh, with Chuck Courtney, there you go.
This is actually a fun favorite of mine. I mean, it's not a very good film, but I like it. It's in the caves, and it's a throwback. I mean, he's trying to be Baron Latos, but it's not working. It's Baron Latos goes west.
Well, this was also another William Bodine for Carradine. And I will say this, Carradine was kind of unfair about this movie because he always proclaimed it was the worst film he ever appeared in. No, not at all. And just by virtue of his performance and the fun he is having, my niece married to a notorious outlaw and all that stuff. No, it's elevated literally by his presence. And Chuck Courtney is absolutely fine. Of course, he was a very accomplished and very famous stuntman. And as a weird little footnote, this is one of the only films that Harry Carey Jr. ever appeared in with his mother, Olive Carey, who, of course, was in The Searchers and, so many other movies. But this was the movie that they appeared in together. And I believe Virginia Christine is also in this film.
She is. I think she's the mother or somebody in this film. Okay, then after this role, Carradine took a kind of a Lugosi type of role in Munsters Go Home as I'm Cruikshank the butler.
Yep, another butler. And John Carradine had always said that he had tested for the role of Herman Munster, and I believe that he did. I'm not saying he was fabricating something, but I'm sure that he did. It would have made total sense, but I think he was getting a little older, and he would have been very thin as Herman, even if they padded him out. And so, of course, he was on the series as Herman's boss, Mr. Gateman, and running the funeral parlor. And then here they put him in, because I guess they said, no, we've got to have John in here someplace. So they put him in as the butler to
Right.
Hermione Gingold and Terry Thomas.
And that was followed up, not followed up, a few films later after The Fiend with the Electronic Brain and the Dr. Terror's Gallery of Horrors. He appeared with Basil Rathbone, looking quite aged there, as Dr. Hamill in the all-time classic Hillbillies in a Haunted House, Court.
There you go, with good old, with Lon Chaney.
Right.
Is in this one. And so is Joy Lansing.
Oh, Joy Lansing from The Fountain of Youth and Orson Welles' project.
And of course, Dr. Terror's Gallery of Horrors is the anthology movie. Carradine's in it, and so is Lon Chaney. And that was for David L. Hewitt. And again, very low budget, and was a way to pick up a couple of shekels. And in the meantime, by this, we should mention that Carradine had appeared in John Ford's Ward Bond's final episode of Wagon Train, which was ironically directed by John Ford, the Coulter Craven story. And Carradine was in it, along with almost all of the Ford stock company at that point. Every Ken Curtis and Paul Birch and all these wonderful people, Anna Lee. And that was the last episode that Ward Bond lived to make. And it was directed by John Ford.
Well, at this point, Court, this signaled a turn to probably not the best period in John Carradine's acting career. He actually went and shot some films in Mexico, a slew of them, before making the Astro Zombies. After making the Astro Zombies, Autopsy of a Ghost, where he played Satan, Diabolical Pact, Blood of Dracula's Castle. He played a butler. Las Vampiras as Count Branos Alucard. And he's also an Enigma de the Mad Doctor, where he played a Nazi leader. Madame Death, and he made The Mummy and the Curse of the Jackals. So he went, I don't know if he went over to Mexico and just made these, or maybe it did a day or two, like Karloff did, I guess, for
Oh, the Jack Hill.
Jack Hill,
Jack.
yeah, right, where he made uh, a slew of films over there, like The Snake People
And the
and
Fear Chamber
The
and
Fear
Incredible.
Chamber and stuff, right. So a lot of these actors did that. I guess, the pay was quick and they did their thing. But the Astro Zombies, I guess, was probably the nadir of, or started to be the nadir of John's career, working for Ted V. Michaels, a very kind of enthusiastic director. I knew Ted very well before he passed. Very fun guy. Loved to make movies. I mean, he was a real movie maker. He made, with his own 60 millimeter cameras. He shot at his ranch in Vegas. But I didn't have the heart to tell him these films weren't that good. They're just fun to watch. But anyway, here's a photo from the Astro Zombies with Turo Santera.
And yeah, well, actually, Astro Zombies may be the best movie Ted Michaels made.
You think so? Oh man.
And well, also he made the Doll Squad, so
The Doll Squad is my favorite, actually.
yeah. And but yeah, he had kind of that little break of almost getting into really the heavy duty exploitation movie business. But you mentioned Blood of Dracula's Castle. Now there was another film that John did with Al Adamson.
Right, Al Adamson, yeah.
Yeah, and that was made here, and that was again started a long association with Al Adamson, and that was not Sam Sherman. That was Rex Carlton, who actually committed suicide because he had borrowed the money to make that movie from basically the mob, and he was afraid of what they would do to him when he couldn't pay it back, so he killed himself.
Wow. So after that film, after Astro Zombies, which is a guilty pleasure, I'm not downplaying it, but it's just a low budget. With you can tell what the sets are. But anyway, after that was Five Bloody Graves. This coffee tastes terrible.
But now, what's cool with Five Bloody Graves, and again, Al Adamson, but that was produced by Robert Dix, the son of Richard Dix, who was a good, solid utility actor. He'd been in Forbidden Planet and what have you. But he was the leading man in Blood of Dracula's Castle, and he wanted to start making his own movies to play in drive-ins and things like that, because that's where all this money was being made. And so they did Five Bloody Graves, which is a really kind of an interesting Western. It's a Western horror movie, and maybe not the most sophisticated, but it is an interesting flick. It's like, wow, these guys kind of took a little bit of a chance with this thing.
Right. And then Carradine made a film that I don't think Vincent Price made, or Lugosi, or Karloff. He made almost an R-rated, well, it was cut. He made an R-rated biker exploitation film, Court, and I'm talking about Hell's Bloody Devils. And he basically just plays a pet shop owner. Maybe he got paid a couple grand for his time. He's in like one or two scenes. But the fact that he's in this kind of violent biker movie was kind of a surprise.
Well, again, this was Sam Sherman again. And this was Independent International. And I think he just liked those guys, and whether it was this or Horror of the Blood Monsters or Fiend with the Electronic Brain or any of those movies, they would call him up and he'd say, "Sure, let's go to town." And he did also a comedy for them. Remember, Jay, that Sunset Cove, which has a lot of
TNA.
lovely young ladies on display.
Right. Well, we'll talk about that. He actually does appear in some sex comedies. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then he made The Cain's Way, which is kind of an interesting Western court. I mean, but he was used to making westerns and stuff. But the film is kind of, as I said, it's interesting that I think it was called something else,
Kane's
uh,
cut.
Kane's Cutthroats, which was a more violent version of Kane's Way.
And well, what was going on also with Carradine, I think at this point was, as I said, he would be hired for a day or two, which is like how he'd end up in a movie like Hell's Bloody Devils, uh, and they would just shoot him out, and then the footage could be chopped up and end up in just a plethora of films, and some of which he had absolutely no idea he was going to be in. This was Jerry Warren did that to him a few times, and he was just handed pages and said go, and there you are. So he did end up in multiple versions of different movies, particularly anything that had to do with Independent International and Adamson or Sam Sherman, just because they would reuse footage from other films and build new films around existing stuff and what have you, and retitle their movies multiple times,
Right.
and put them out again.
And one of his most famous films, not for being good, is I think the most multi-titled film in the history of the genre. We had Horror of the Blood Monsters, which was also Creatures of the Prehistoric Planet, Creatures of the Red Planet, Space Mission to the Lost Planet, and of course, Vampire Men of the Lost Planet, Court.
And yes, in Spectrum X, the great new color process. And Robert Dix is in this. He's the fellow at Mission Control on planet Earth. And Vicky Volante and a lot of the usual gang from the Al Adamson, Sam Sherman pictures. And that movie actually has an opening that was shot in an alley right next to Bordner's Saloon in Hollywood, with Al Adamson and his Gus Peters and all these folks that we knew, wandering around with vampire fangs. And the great, the really notable thing about Horror of the Blood Monsters is that terrific graphic one sheet with art by Neil Adams.
But anyway, here's another case where John Carradine, after making a series of just low budget Z grade films, just for the cash or for the money, and whether it pays the rent or buys booze, or I mean, these are when these actors are near the end of their career. Whether it's Lugosi, it's just the choices aren't the best, but it's for the money. They just want to work, and that's what they're used to doing. So anyway, he was asked to appear in Myra Breckinridge, which was a big studio film about a sex change operation going from Raquel Welch to Rex Reed. And John Carradine has a great scene in the, obviously there has to be a surgery. It's about a big sex change operation. So he has to perform the surgery. John Carradine is great in this role as the surgeon. He's like, I've never performed this kind of surgery before. Do you want your breasts to be inflatables or just regular? And the guy's like, I don't care. I make them any way you want. Well, if I do it any way you want, you may not like it. So it's almost like his dialogue was almost improvised, like Court.
Yeah, and I think he's wonderful. Obviously, this is a throwback to Captive Wild Woman and, all the many times he spent in operating theaters with beakers bubbling over and Kenneth Strickfaden, electrical equipment snapping and throwing electricity off. And the thing, again, going back to how Carradine's work was going during that period where he was jumping around with Al Adamson, what have you, before he got tagged for Myra Breckinridge, he did a huge movie for John Ford. He's in Cheyenne Autumn.
Okay.
And the scenes with Jimmy Stewart. So, again, it was and of course also, he was by then also had been a regular playing Chuck Connor's father on Branded. So he was doing big network television, and then, Horror of the Blood Monsters and all over the place. But as far as the theatrical features go, yep, Myra Breckinridge because of the notoriety of the novel and everything else. It was 20th Century Fox. I mean, that was a big deal.
Right. And then once again, from Myra Breckinridge back down to a very low budget 7-day shoot with Blood Legacy or Legacy of Blood. And it's just, I think it's a reading of a will court, and his voice is on a tape machine. It's kind of like a little bit of a parody of House on Haunted Hill. If any of you want to spend the night, I'll give you $10,000.
And yeah, exactly. And again, an indie flick, and Carradine made himself available, I doubt, for more than a day for that film.
Right. He actually was in a bunch of these low budget films at this stage. We'll get to his next film, which was actually kind of fun. But Silent Night, Bloody Night, Blood of Ghastly Horror.
There's a title for that's a pure independent international title. It's
right.
just,
Super Chick with Joyce Jillson, who was a well-known, I think, a tarot reader at the time, but she was
yes.
well endowed. And Carradine's in that, trying to lure, I guess, trying to marry. You want to marry me, Super Chick? Or everything you always want to know about sex, at 1 a.m. on the Z channel. But speaking of that film, Woody Allen, it's that multi-part film about the history of sex, and Carradine plays Dr. Bernardo. And he's Woody and his girlfriend on a date, and they end up at this mad scientist's house. He's totally doing a total takeoff on himself. And he's showing them all these, I can't go into it, it's too graphic, but he goes into all these kind of fun little tidbits about sexual situations coming from Carradine.
Well, that's kind of the great fun of it, is it's so unexpected to hear John Carradine making these statements. But there's a wonderful interview with Woody Allen when he reveals, and it was no slight against John Carradine, but his first choice was actually Lon Chaney. And Woody Allen had a meeting with Lon Chaney, who was just in such terrible health, in the throes of the throat cancer and everything else. But it was wonderful to read this. He said that it was like the only time he was ever starstruck was here's poor Lon Chaney, and just absolutely, very close to the end, and he was just, falling apart. And Woody Allen just thought, oh my God, this is the coolest thing of all time.
That would have been interesting.
But he was too ill to do it, and it would have been an entirely different thing, because by this time, with Lon's weight and what have you, the idea of him as a mad scientist, which he never really played, they would throw him into things very late in his career, but that's not what he was known for. So Carradine immediately carries that wonderful history with him, and I can't think of anybody more fun than John Carradine to say all these outrageous things, and especially in that incredible voice.
Right. I can imagine. Lon Chaney would mostly play the sidekick. By the end of his career, he was doing the Tor Johnson role. He really wasn't saying much. He was mostly just grunting or saying a few things. Oh, I bet the doctor will really like this one. So you're right about that. It would have been a completely different role. So anyway, continuing with this slew of low-budget films John Carradine appeared in, maybe for a day or two, his rheumatoid arthritis, where his knuckles were buckling, could be seen in a lot of these films, especially in Terror in the Wax Museum Court.
Oh yes, and that was Andy Fenady, who made that movie, was a very great friend of mine, and told me he would have a Christmas party once a year. And of course, would invite who he had worked with during that year. And he was still producing Branded with Chuck Connors, and he loved John Carradine. And he had produced Terror in the Wax Museum and another movie called Arnold. John Carradine's in that also. And his brother George had directed. So they were having a great deal of fun. And about midnight, at the during the Christmas party, John Carradine strode into the crowd of people to announce, "I must inform this entire party that Mr. Broderick Crawford has destroyed the downstairs bathroom."
Oh, this isn't where he pronounced himself as the Lord, right? That was another story.
No, no. The yeah, apparently walking across the swimming pool at Chateau Marmont to prove he was divine was probably a little close around 1942 or 43.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was mixing up the stories then. Continuing with these low budget but fun early 70s horror movies, John Carradine appeared in The House of Seven Corpses, where a film crew is making a film, and one by one, members of the crew are killed off court.
Yes, with Faith DeMerg is
Oh,
in this film.
Faith emerges in this. It's actually,
Yes.
it's not a bad film. It's what it is. It shows the making of a horror film.
Yes. And in that still, Jay, that you chose very aptly, you really can see how poor John Carradine's fingers were being twisted by his arthritis, which was just a horrible affliction. And but boy, it wouldn't stop him.
Oh,
It
not at
would not.
all.
Nope.
Not at all. And then after that, Court, once again, I don't find me another actor who would appear in a top studio film, one or two in a row, and then go off for a quick one day in some low budget Z grade film because he was friends with the filmmakers or he just appreciated it and it was a quick money. And I don't know any other actor in the history of Hollywood. I mean, they all did it from, I mean, obviously Cam Mitchell and, a lot of other stars made some low budget stuff, but I just don't see anybody making high quality studio films and then appearing in something low budget in their next film. And such was the case when John Carradine appeared in The Shootist as The Undertaker.
That was such a wonderful cameo. And when, in fact, I can tell you, backtracking just a few years, when Bobby Carradine was making The Cowboys, his dad showed up on the set to see John Wayne, and they had a reunion. And they made Robert. They had a little ceremony and made Robert a honorary member of the John Ford Stock Company.
Oh, that's cool.
I thought that was very sweet. But if there is a wonderful behind-the-scenes featurette about the Shootist, it was done, I believe, for the BBC, and what you see is John Carradine doing the scene with John Wayne. And Carradine's very famous memory is starting to fail him a little bit. And he's obviously terribly embarrassed about it. But John Wayne, everybody they were terrific. And they said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, John. I mean, he was working with his contemporaries. He was working with the people who regarded him with respect and treated him that way. And his cameo in that movie is great fun. And the fact that it's this wonderful reunion with him and John Wayne. I mean, you think about Stagecoach and then you think about The Shootist. What a wonderful bookend there.
Oh, it was. It was a great cameo. And then another actually, he stayed. This is actually different. John actually made a couple high quality studio films in a row. And after The Shootist, he was in The Last Tycoon. Not a big role. He played a tour guide, but that was a big Robert De Niro film about a movie producer.
Kazan.
Yeah. And so he made that film, or just a quick cameo. And then after that, he steals the film, especially at the end of The Sentinel, where he's the guardian of hell. And they want to know, what is this place? And Carradine's famous line is, it's the doorway to hell.
Oh, and that wonderfully designed Dick Smith makeup.
Right. And he's watching this old townhouse, and they're waiting for someone to replace him. And it's this girl moves in, and there's an all-star cast, Burgess Meredith and Christopher Walken and a lot of other people.
Jerry Orbach and Chris Sarandon. And,
right. And Chris Sarandon has a scary role. He goes, I am dead. So it's a very scary movie, the Sentinel. But John Carradine steals the show. And at the end, he carries the cross across the living room where all the demons are all reaching for the cross. Very, very spooky film, The Sentinel.
And
Anyway,
directed by Michael Winner,
oh, right,
who
Michael Winner.
actually stepped in for Don Siegel. I don't know why Siegel left the movie, but he was under contract to Universal. It may have been because they moved him over to a film called The Black Windmill with Michael Caine. But yeah, Siegel was the original director of that film, and then and Michael Winner took it over.
Great film. And then after that, there was a couple of films. Satan's Cheerleaders, which, as I said, once again, back to the low-budget fare. But but Satan's Cheerleaders is actually he plays a bum. It's Satan's Cheerleaders. And I think John Ireland's in it, and Yvonne DiCarlo. And it's a high school cheerleading squad who secretly belong to a cult that prays to the devil. And I think it's pretty much represent mid to late 70s drive-in fare, Court.
Oh yeah, and that was Graydon Clark, and oh yeah, just wonderful. And also during this time in the drive-in fare, of course, John had a wonderful reunion with David in Boxcar Bertha, directed by Marty Scorsese.
Right, he was in that film as well, and then once again after Satan's Cheerleaders, he has a small role as a boat captain who is taking Peter Cushing, I guess, to an island where he's going to do some experiments, which is a great premise. The film's called Shockwave. It's some great scenes of zombie Nazis rising from the ocean. It's historically great. And I think Cushing wants to, I guess, resuscitate them and bring back the Fourth Reich. And John Carradine is obviously the boat captain who doesn't know what's going on until it's too late. And of course, he ends up dead because, what do you mean zombies, Nazis back from the dead?
Well, it's Ken Wiederhorn. The interesting thing about Shockwaves, other than the fact that I think it's really a fun movie, was that they were able to convince Peter Cushing to leave England because he really very rarely did that. And I don't know if this was around the time he appeared in the TV movie about Harry Houdini, where he played Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and may have already been here in the States. And he also made his appearance at the Famous Monsters Convention at that time, and they were promoting what was going to be the movie of Vampirella. But they shot Shockwaves in Florida, and Fred Olen Ray was a production assistant on it.
Wow.
And it was his first encounter with John Carradine, and he just loved Peter Cushing. He just said he was just so kind to everybody. And so there you go. The histories, continue. Everybody, John Carradine filtering through.
Keep it down. Yeah, and after that, back to the sex comedies, Court, and Vampire Hookers was one of them, and where he basically plays Count Dracula. I mean, He's wearing the Baron Latos kind of bow tie, and he's got the stringed cape, and of course, there's lots of buxom women in here, and he's playing Count Dracula for like the 10th time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right, and then after Vampire Hookers, Court, came Nocturna with Nay Bonet.
And this again was another Dracula performance, really.
Well, he is playing Count Dracula. That's who he's playing.
Yeah.
Even though, his name is Count Dracula. And Nay Bonet was, I guess, famous for making a couple of raunchy films at the time, and she was a dancer. And so they decided to give her a starring vehicle. And you can see in there, do I have to get up again? Just biting on the neck. You're so tiresome. So he kind of did a parody of himself. I mean, there he is at 70-something playing Count Dracula.
Yep.
So I always thought that was cool. Anyway, after the Vampire Hookers and Nocturna, Court, he returned and made an Uli Lommel film called The Boogeyman, which is
Oh,
about
Boogeyman.
a spirit that I guess comes out of a mirror, which was very unique at the time, and commits kind of these weird spiritual killings. And the girl who's haunted by it goes to see John Carradine.
And I believe it was a girl, Susanna Love, I think.
Susanna Love, who I think was romantically involved with Lomel at the time.
Yeah, she was married to him.
Oh, okay. Well, that solves that problem.
Yeah. And no, I remember I saw a friend of mine was one of the editors on that film. And I saw it right as I guess it was just the year I graduated from USC. And that movie made a lot of money. It was really interesting that here, this small little independent horror flick, and there were a lot of them at that time, of course, but it struck a chord. Of course, the title, no one had, the fact that nobody had used it yet was remarkable. So they came up with that great ad campaign, and that thing did really well. So it was really cool that here's John Carradine in a hit movie.
Right. The only time I think it was used was The Boogeyman Will Get You, I guess, with what,
Right.
Lugosi and Karloff back in the 40s.
Go see Boris Karloff and Peter Lorre.
Right. So, yeah, no one used it. And it was a big hit that it spawned a sequel, Boogeyman 2.
It sure did.
I don't think it did as well, but it was a fascinating movie. Okay, so now let's get to another famous role. John is he's in throughout the whole movie, and what's great is he's named after a great Universal horror director, Earl C. Ketton. So anytime he'd appear on screen, they'd go, "Oh, Earl, take it easy. I don't want to take it easy. I want to burn." And we're talking about the great, great movie, The Howling, and it's just a fantastic film with Patrick McNee. And it's just about a retreat where people get away, I guess, to find themselves, and they end up all being werewolves. And Carradine's the old werewolf there, and he's just tired of being a werewolf in this scene. And at the end, he has that famous line where they all turn. He goes, You can't train us, Doc. It ain't natural."
And
But I know you like this movie, Court.
I really do. And of course, Dee Wallace is wonderful, and her then husband, Christopher Stone, who later passed away, is quite good. And the wonderful Elizabeth Brooks, Slim Pickens. It's just wonderful. Joe Dante did such a great job directing this. And of course, you've got a wonderful John Sayles screenplay.
Right.
And everything is meant to tribute those movies, including the opening with Ken Toby as the cop, and all that, and Dick Miller running the bookstore selling all the archival books about werewolves and demons and things, and werewolves are worse than cockroaches.
Right.
And it's a terrific movie, and the fact that John Carradine character is named for a director that he worked with at Universal is just on the two house pictures and other things along the way, I think was just a masterstroke.
No, it's a great send up of Hollywood and horror films. And then, of course, we're getting near the end. We're in the 80s now, 1981, near the last few films that John Carradine would make. I mean, he made a few others that he would appeared in. Maybe some weren't even films. Were just directors at the time, straight to video fodder. Because some films even came out in 93 and 95. 10 years after 10 years after he died with him in it. But one of the great films that he appeared in was with Vincent Price in The Monster Club, Court.
Yeah, directed by Roy Ward Baker, and all the stories were derived from short stories by R. Chetwynd Hayes, and it's a fun movie. It is more on, if you will, the kind of lighthearted comedic side than, say, Tales from the Crypt. But it is an anthology, and it's fun to see John Carradine in this, and he's quite wonderful. And interplay with him and Vincent Price is quite good. And also, too, Jay, remember that just for horror aficionados, Curtis Harrington and Dan Curtis and all these people were putting John into horror television movies all the time. The
Of
Cat
course.
Creature, whatever it was. Yeah, he became the symbol of the genre for so many of these producers and directors. And so they felt like they had to use him.
Right. I mean, I'm sure he was, of course, he was in Twilight Zone, The Howling Man, and he was in Tales from the Dark Side. So near the end of his life, the last 10, 15 years, John did a lot of science fiction, horror, television,
Sure,
not to
Night
mention,
Gallery. Oh,
yeah,
wonderful.
television in general. I mean, you mentioned Branded, and he was in so many, the Night Gallery, big surprise. I mean, we haven't even touched the iceberg on, the tip of the iceberg of all the TV work that John Carradine did because we wanted to focus on his films. This would be an 8-hour marathon if we included the television,
Yes.
but there's no doubt that he just would, any television show you can think of from the 50s to maybe the late 80s, he was on, and multiple times.
Oh, sure,
So,
especially with something like Wagon Train or Tales of Wells Fargo or something like that. They always brought him back.
right. And then anyway, so concluding, he had made a couple more films before he passed. And one of them was, and I think this is the best he's looked. And that was in The Nesting, which is also called Massacre Mansion. He played a colonel.
I don't remember much about this movie except what you have just said, and that was noting that Carradine he seemed to have put on weight and he looked more kind of pulled together. He didn't seem quite as gaunt and frail in this movie.
No, he looked really good. And anyway, and then the last film we're going to talk about was The Great Gathering of Horror Stars, one of the last great gathering of horror stars. Peter Cushing, Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, and John Carradine in The House of the Long Shadows. And I don't think this gets the credit that it does after all these years. I think people consider it a minor film. When you have these legends all together, and yes, it's a little bit of a send up and a tongue in cheek, but they just don't make movies like this. It's almost a throwback to the old Universal, gallery of monsters.
The problem for me with House of Long Shadows, unfortunately, is twofold. Desi Arnaz Jr. and for some reason I've always thought the film looked cheap. And Pete Walker, and of course we knew Mike Armstrong was a great guy who wrote the screenplay, and it was the Seven Keys to Baldpate and all of that. And I just wish that Canon had, upped the game just a little bit as far as the presentation went. But that was also one of the famous John Carradine stories when they were doing a press conference for the movie, and some very nice, intrepid reporter said, "Oh, gentlemen, if this is a success, any chance for a sequel?" And John Carradine pipes up, "If there is one, they better hurry the hell up."
Right. And of course there wasn't, but it was a one and done kind of film. But I know, listen, Desi Arnaz, right? He actually pulls a Wallace Ford on this one, at least for me. But I just like when you put all the stars together. I just forget about the movie and just the interplay between them all. Not much for Carradine to do. I mean, because he was kind of, the elders gentleman of it all, probably, of all of them. But it's just a great swan song. I mean, he made a couple other films, and we're going to mention one more he made that I know you like. And he has a scene as Leo in Peggy Sue Got Married Court.
He sure does. And again, we talk about the career pendulum swinging in all directions for John Carradine, and where he was in demand on A Pictures, and then he would go to an independent, whatever. And here, suddenly, to see John Carradine in this Francis Coppola movie, which is a movie I actually like quite well, was just delightful. I thought that was so cool that he was in that movie. And just what a great send off. Now, of course, he did do a few things for Harry Allen Towers. In fact, I believe it was Buried Alive, which I think is just now coming out, was the very last film he appeared in.
And the Tomb Court, the Tomb.
The Tomb for Fred Olden Ray was in there. But then, and he died on his way home from location. But, you talk about going out with your boots on. That is John Carradine. He was a thespian right to the very last breath he ever drew. It's amazing.
That is hardly a look. I mean, that's, we would need 4 or 5 more hours, but that is our take in this time frame to honor the great John Carradine from the good and the bad and the ugly. And it's just a fantastic career. Quick story, real quick, about John Carradine. A year before he died, a friend of mine was working at Johnny Rockets on Melrose. It's no longer there. It's a hamburger joint, kind of like a Cafe 50s. And my friend called me up on the phone. I think it might have been 1987, 86. Says, Jay, one of your horror guys is here. You got to get down here quickly. And I was busy. I couldn't break away. I go, who is it? He goes, I know he's an old guy. He's got a beard. And he ordered a hamburger. And he kept putting ketchup on it. And I need more ketchup. And so it ended up being John Carradine was having a burger at a diner on Melrose, and I didn't make it down there. I'm so bummed. I would have probably had him to myself for the whole time, because he said no one's going up to him, no one even recognizes him. So that's one of the great regrets I have, that I missed having lunch. I missed sharing a burger court with John Carradine. God darn it, pass me the ketchup, Jay. So anyway, Court, that concludes another edition. So keep watching. We've got a lot of great episodes to bring you, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And we appreciate you subscribing and becoming a part of our little club. So, Court, as I always ask, any closing words?
Go nuts for John Carradine tonight. Go watch House of Frankenstein, watch The Mummy's Ghost, or watch Horror of the Blood Monsters.
Thank you for joining us. Join us next time when we'll cover other topics like universal horror, Poverty Row, and profiles on people like Bela Lugosi, John Carradine, Peter Lorre, and even on myself. Until next time, stay scared.